So you lent on past experiences of something similar, which you came through and benefited from and learnt from and grew from into new opportunity. In this instance, processed some of the negativity reasonably quickly and thought, actually, last time this happened, I ended up doing well from this. I wonder what the opportunity is this time.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky.
Hi, I'm Rich.
And today, the question is, how do I make the best of change situations? What do you think to that, Rich?
I don't know. How do I make the best of change? Do you know what? Do you know what? Sometimes I find interesting when you work with a team and individuals in a team, and something happens. They change a reporting line, or they restructure it slightly, or whatever. Make some change. Some people very quickly see an opportunity and sort of start moving towards it, whereas some people get stuck. And I always find that really interesting. What is it that one group's doing that the other group's not doing? Or what is it in their makeup, their background, their personality that enables them to move more quickly?
That's really interesting. And what it causes me to remember is when I was made redundant.
Mm.
Well, I wasn't actually at the time, but I worked for a financial services organisation, one that had been...
Is this around the time that you brought the banking industry down?
Yes, I take full
Right.
ownership of that.
Yeah.
If only I was that clever. But I worked in the Midlands. Our head office was in Bournemouth, and I was summoned at 3 p.m. in the afternoon
Yeah.
to a 7 p.m. meeting in Bournemouth,
Right.
in a hotel in Bournemouth. And so of course, your head's doing somersaults all the way down.
Jungle drums start beating.
Because what you're going to do, you're in the car, you start ringing your colleagues, wonder what's going on, and you start to speculate. And we got to we got to the hotel. As you walked in through the reception, there was a sign, and this sign said nationwide, and this was a separate meeting.
As in the building society.
As in the Building Society, yes. And there was a separate meeting going on, purely
Coincidental.
nothing to do with what we were doing. I walked into the big meeting room, and there was all the senior managers from this Building Society that I was working for, which was the Portman at the time. And we sit down, and we're told we're now merging.
Mm.
If it was a merger, more of an acquisition, but merging with the Nationwide.
Right.
So half an hour later, it's like, right, you can go then. And I'm like, so I've just driven 2.5, 3 hours to spend half an hour. Could you not just have told me this over the phone, use the video system that we've got, which was a lot more primitive than it is today, by the way. But
Yeah.
so, of course, I'm walking out thinking, okay, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And my Portman colleagues, who had been probably the more dominant player in previous mergers and acquisitions, were all going, well, I suppose it was our turn then, eventually. We've done it to enough people. Now it's our turn.
Yeah.
And there's a real kind of arrogance and ego that seemed to come through there. And then, of course, I've now got to sit in a car for another 2.5, 3 hours wondering what does this mean? How does this play out? What does this mean for me? And it was Oxford, and I remember it really clearly that by the time Oxford came around, which was about halfway, I'd already processed what this meant for me, what I would do about it, depending on, of course, I had no information about whether I was leaving, whether I was staying, or whether I'd be offered something else.
Right.
But I'd already processed in my mind what the various options could be and how I would react to each of them. So I was ready. I was seeing it very much as that opportunity, whereas my colleagues started to be very much, oh, what does this mean? They're not going to want one of me in there. They're not going to want two of these departments, two of these roles, et cetera, et cetera. So they were starting to see it a threat.
Do you think some of that was about your personality then? Because knowing you as I do, we've spent many years together. Um, you are quite adventurous. You're open to new opportunities. You quite like a bit of excitement, something new. So do you think part of that was in your personality that you have a preference for that stuff? What and I suppose in a financial services building society type environment, you might get a number, I'm generalizing here, but you might get a number of people who are less inclined to be like that, who are more cautious and let's take things carefully. And maybe that people who are more like that personality wise found it harder to make that adjustment so quickly.
I think yes, but I also think that I went through a journey on my journey, if that makes sense. My thought patterns were, oh God, what does this mean? What they're going to do? Are they going to close us down? Are they going to, consolidate everything into Swindon, which was their kind of main head office, and they've got big administration centres in Northampton, for example. And you're going, so you go through this almost neurotic state of, oh, everything's changed and how am I going to cope, through to actually, I think you're right. My embracing of opportunity and change, I go looking for new
Mm.
because I get bored easily. So therefore, actually, this is an opportunity for me. This is something I can either take my skills elsewhere. I could do something on my own, or or go and join another organization.
So you quickly moved through an emotional state because you must have felt some emotion. You mentioned a bit about what does this mean and what's going to happen next. Did you feel a little bit of uncertainty and emotion related to that?
Yeah, I did, and I think, initially I'd taken on a new team, so I was running a big department up in the Midlands,
Hmm.
and I'd invested a lot of time and effort in that team. We were making um, some real successes. We were having a lot of wins. We were, outperforming other departments that were similar to us, and I was really proud of what we created. And then all of a sudden, I felt like somebody was taking that away.
Yeah, so there was a sense of loss around that, but you quickly spun it and started to move into more positive emotion and start to think about um, in a strong positive way what this might mean for you.
I did. And I think I was able to do that partly because my personality, but also because of the experiences I'd had of something similar. So I wasn't originally with the Portman. I was with a more regional building society, and when the Portman came and merged, takeover us, I'd already been through some of that loops and survived, and done, positioned myself reasonably well out of that, and therefore I was confident. I'd got some helpful stuff to fall back on.
So you lent on past experiences of something similar,
Yeah,
which you came through and benefited from and learnt from and grew from into new opportunity. So you then, in this instance, processed some of the negativity reasonably quickly and thought, actually, last time this happened, I ended up doing well from this. I wonder what the opportunity is this time.
yeah, totally. And I think, from my perspective, I also was committed to helping my team with that transition too. So it was easier for me because I wasn't stuck.
Ah, right, as well. So you found yet more purpose in this because putting words in your mouth, but what you potentially were doing as well is saying, I have a role to play to help my team come through this.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's because we'd been on a journey together. I was absolutely connected to them and wanted them to position themselves. I mean, um, you know, one of my goals was everybody got something positive out of the experience. And I don't mean they got, their redundancy payment, but, you know, everybody who wanted another job or role, we found one, whether that was still within Nationwide or whether that was external. So I basically went, everybody gets a job, and they might need to use it as a stepping stone into another one, but everybody got an opportunity if they chose. Some chose to go and blow their redundancy on Ibiza or whatever, and that's fine. That was the key thing, was they chose their outcome that they wanted to.
So you've seen, you've processed, you've got to a place of recalling on the past. You've started to think about opportunities. You've seen some purpose in your role in this to help people. Now, can you remember, what about those colleagues of yours that didn't deal with this so well, that were taken, that were asked to go down to Bournemouth that day and didn't deal with it so well? What happened to some of them? What did they go through on the journey?
Well, I think some of them followed the same path as me and came out the other side, and made some choices about what they wanted to do. So they kind of, what we would frame as control the controllables. I know you do a lot of this in your sports coaching, that says, look, what is within my gift? What can I control? And a lot of them did that, in fairness. Whereas there are others that just had got so stuck in the Portman way, they couldn't break out of that thinking. So they were very, um, they probably spent, and these people, in fairness, were more probably Bournemouth based than they were in the Midlands, and found it really hard to find that next role. I think some took quite a number of months or even up to a year to go and find something else, because they were still clinging on
Mm.
to the good old days.
So they hadn't come to terms with it.
They hadn't come to terms with it, and they were looking to effectively go, I was this, and now I need to be.
I was that, and now I'm
I
not.
want the same thing somewhere else. They couldn't let go of
Right.
what they'd lost.
Which brings me to kind of my final point with this, because knowing you as I do, I know that you are a confident person. You have a healthy level of self-belief, which would mean that, I'm guessing that when this happened, yes, it knocked you, you quickly recovered, but it didn't roll into other areas of your life. You kept a healthy self-esteem, and by the sounds of it, had strong belief that you could go on and do something else. What you talked about just then, though, is maybe some of those people that had created an identity for themselves in the role and their place at head office, and we've been here quite a while, and suddenly that had been threatened, and perhaps then didn't know what to do and who they were. Do you think there's something in that around your self-esteem, and how it helped you orientate towards opportunity rather than threat in this change that happened?
It certainly did for me, and I think for those colleagues that struggled. I mean, Bournemouth's not. There's a lot of organisations down in Bournemouth. Other financial services, and a lot kind of transitioned into those roles. But all of a sudden, the competition became greater, and they were now competing against colleagues, former colleagues.
Mm.
These people that they would have been in meetings with, solving problems together, now became a competitor for roles in those other organisations. So I think, the threat actually became more acute for them, because they perhaps couldn't see the opportunities in quite the same way. It meant potentially moving out of Bournemouth, perhaps travelling beyond in terms of going into London or elsewhere. And that, now affected not just them, it affected their families, because, we all have to earn a living, right? So
Mm.
all of a sudden, the whole of their world was turned upside down, as opposed to just, I'm now not working here, I'm working there.
Mm. Okay, all right. So I think there's a number of really interesting things we've talked about there. That there will be winners and losers, and maybe that's a choice sometimes, not every time, but sometimes there is a choice with organizational change, if you can come to terms with it, about how you can draw on positive positive levels of self-esteem, how you can draw on positive experiences that can orientate you towards what the opportunity might be, and how you can perhaps challenge yourself to look at where you can grow through this change that's coming. And I guess the people that, I said one of the things that always fascinates me is how some people can do that quickly. I think you've articulated quite nicely, Ricky, through your story, some of the things that potentially help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for my counselling session, Richard.
Thank you for sharing.
Next time on The Question Is.
Let's call it System 1 and System 2 for argument's sake. System 1 is our emotional reaction. We always will use System 1 first. It triggers your fight or your flight. System 2 is slower. It's always dealing with second-hand information from System 1, but it is where we're able to be rational, and it's a conscious thought process.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.